which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the August 21st, 2018 Board of Public Affairs meeting. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the August 7th special joint meeting with City Council and the August 7th regular meeting. All been presented with minutes. See any additions, corrections?
There's no changes. I'll make a motion to accept as presented. I'll second.
Jim?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen? Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is a hearing of public concerns. If I may speak, I'm sure you folks read the paper last Tuesday. I was kind of involved in a debate with Mr. Kiston, the Pioneer, and there's an article written in the Bryan Times, which I don't think was very kind to me or very fair. So I had a meeting today with the Bryan Times, and we both agreed that there was some poor choice of words. So we kind of did a mini interview and clarified my position, and so there'll be something in the paper. And then to the people that have doubts about my position, make up their own mind. But I just want to know or state for the record that the August 7th joint meeting with council, resolution 18 that we passed opposing, I still stand by that. I have no plans on altering, changing, rescinding, presenting a new resolution. I stand by this resolution here. And that's all I have to say about it. If there's any questions towards me, I'd like to hear them. If not, we'll move on to city business. Next, clerk, treasurer's report. Please.
The board's
overtime and other premium payroll costs. Interruption, of course, may occur at night, on weekends, holidays, during unfavorable weather. It can create emergency conditions that increase safety risks, and it leads to less predictable staffing costs and rates. So the proactive approach will provide fewer negative service and financial impacts in the long term, and to provide reliable service at competitive rates, we must be proactive. We can't run to failure. That can't be our mode of operation here. It doesn't meet our needs. It doesn't meet our customer service requirements. But we then, of course, discuss developing long-term capital plans and budgets, and then identifying the financial resources to implement those plans. The board may recall we had a bit of a discussion about what is an appropriate level of capital improvements funding. And we use two guidelines. One is depreciation expense, that you are at least investing what your system is depreciating every year to maintain that system value. If you take a look at Moody's or some of those other investment services that rate municipal utilities and the bonds, revenue bonds that they issue, to them, a declining value means that you are deferring maintenance and you're just punting rate increases to the future with inflation. So it becomes even more expensive. And the second guideline that we used was to take a look at our major assets, estimate the service lives of those assets, the replacement costs, and develop budgets based on those numbers. So, for example, in the electric system, we take a look at substations, vehicles, street lights, security lights, determine the number of each of those system components, again, estimated the service life, divide that by the number that we have there to get the number that need to be replaced annually, estimated what the replacement cost is, and then use that to calculate an annual replacements budget. So, for example, one of the calculations was that we have 4,123 wooden poles in our system, average 40 years life expected service life. You divide that by the total number there, and that means we need to replace about 103 poles each year. The average pole replacement cost is a little over $3,000, so that leads to an annual budget then of about $313,400. Okay? And we did that with all of our system components in the electric, water, and telecommunications areas. The other issue that we've discussed is the increase in water sales. And this chart begins in 1989, but if we went back, our highest year was in 1975. So we were already decreasing in our sales from 1989. But when we take a look even at more recent years, our 2014 sales were a little over 400 million gallons. 2017, last year, 312 million gallons. That's a 22% decrease from 2014 to 2018. So even though you have a rate plan in place and you're adjusting those rates, the number of sales that you're making out there has continued to decrease, and it's part of a long-term trend here. We look back, we showed this chart over the last 20 years. Residential sales have decreased 17.5%, commercial and industrial nearly 40%. So the total between all of those customers is that compared to 1997 and 2016, we sold approximately 32% fewer gallons of water or hundreds of cubic feet of water. So that presents some challenges. Now, the BPA adopted a 5-year water rate plan in 2015. It was based on water sales remaining the same. As I mentioned, that didn't happen. They've decreased another 22+% since that time. We took a look at using 2018, for our 2018 budget, we estimated revenues based on our projected 2017 revenues with the third step of that rate adjustment. There are 2 more that are currently scheduled to occur, approximately 3% in December of 2018 and another 3% adjustment in 2019 if you take no additional action. So when we took a look at revenues, this shows
where we thought we would end up this year with the rate adjustments, and you can see each of these years had a rate adjustment. And even though there was a rate adjustment here, we still brought in less revenue than the year before, and not appreciably a lot more, because the first 3 years of that rate plan were approximately 7% annual rate adjustments. So you can see the impacts there. The expenses, what we budgeted was very close to what was budgeted, actually less than was budgeted last year. But as you can see, our actual expenditures were significantly less than budgeted. We expect that to be the case again this year. So when we took a look at the depreciation expense, and Pat maintains that log down there at the clerk treasurer's office for us, it ended up showing only $241,570 in annual depreciation expense, versus when we take a look at the capital replacement plan, it's closer to $1.1 million. Some of that, I think, is the age of the assets. They're just not on the books anymore. And we have had a tradition of any water main projects that we did, we were not capitalizing the labor and adding it to that asset log. So we worked with Pat, and she helped us with getting that included with the projects last year. We will continue doing that in the future, and those two numbers are going to come closer together as time goes by. So this year, that's our capital budget that was approved by the board last fall, about $750,000. You can see a big chunk of that is water main replacement projects, but we also have vehicle replacements, things that need to be done to the wells, to the water plant, to the buildings and structures, things like that. So it's more than just the water main replacement piece of it. But what our actual budget that the board adopted showed almost $100,000 loss. We were projecting a loss in the water fund. So that would be money that comes out of the water fund itself, and it would reduce the water fund balance. At the time that you adopted the budget, you had about $1.9 million in the water fund. As of the end of July, you're a little over $2 million. So it has increased some since that time. And that includes the transfer of $200,000 to the South Walnut Street water main replacement program. So you partially funded that with cash this year. The rest of it was borrowed through a loan through the Ohio Water Development Authority. So specifically with the water system, though, you've got approximately 70 miles of water main. If you assume a 100-year life for that, which is a liberal lifespan, service life, you need to replace approximately 7/10 of a mile or 3,700 feet of water main annually, assuming a $140 per linear foot replacement cost. That's over $500,000 a year. And it's probably, depending upon the project, going to be between that $500,000 and $600,000 a year that you're going to need to take a look at. So what we recommended last fall during the budget process was that you review the water revenue requirements and modify the rate plan if necessary to generate sufficient revenue to fund the annual capital improvements plan. In the meantime, until we get to that point, to allow you to spread those adjustments out over a longer period of time and perhaps make them smaller, we can continue to take a look at financing some water capital improvements until the rate plan is implemented. In the long run, you really want to be able to generate enough revenue to fund your annual capital improvements costs. And by that, I mean the things that the water system improvements, the vehicle replacements, the building improvements, those types of things. And then only borrow money when you have something extraordinary, like a new water plant or a new water tower or something like that. But we're not anywhere close to that right now. And John's going to talk to you a little bit about where we are and where we could be. But again, we're not here tonight to request any action. We really wanted to just kind of update you about 3 months before that next rate adjustment is scheduled to occur, so that you had a little bit of time to think about whether you want to stick with this or if you want to look at something different. So that's really our intention tonight. So that was all that I had.
Kevin, I have a question. In your opinion, why did the water projection forecast differ from what we actually experienced?
I think that we've continued to see an increase in individual residential usage, so that one I think is not unique to Bryan. It's happening all over the United States. The bigger piece of it is due to change in our industry primarily. And if you take a look back to 2015, what was Trim Trends or Harvard Industries over here was one of our larger users of water. It's not there anymore. Aero Corporation or New Era isn't operating where they were before. I don't remember when Bryan Canning Company ceased operations, but you've had a number of those folks that were pretty significant water users that have contributed to that, not only the 22% since 2014, but looking back to the 40% since 1997.
So they're no longer contributing to our water requirements.
That's right, because we're selling fewer units. Now, part of the rate structure that the board approved back in 2015 included some more of those costs being allocated as per customer basis as a fixed cost to try to help offset some of those declining sales numbers. But there's no question that if we could slow down, stop that decrease in sales, or actually through economic development perhaps, or additional home building here in town, businesses, turn that the other way, it would make a big difference in the revenue that's available to fund those capital improvements. We're covering all of our operation and maintenance costs, and it's when we throw in the capital improvements that we believe we need to reach that additional total of about 1.1 million that we're falling short. And we can do that for a while. We can take some money out of the fund balance if you'd like, but that in the long run is not a sustainable answer here when you're talking about those levels. You've got about $2 million in the water fund. You've got to have enough money to pay the bills. You've got to have enough money to pay insurance deductibles if you have them, catastrophic losses of various kinds. So, you know, what is that appropriate number? We've got to work on that for you. But we have gotten some guidelines from some of the rating agencies for water funds, and we'll be bringing some information for your consideration in the future.
So in the forecast that they came up with, they didn't forecast our industrial load decreasing.
That's correct.
That was the wild card, what I call in forecasting.
Yes.
We didn't anticipate that, so therefore.
Correct. The sales
someplace
forecast was zero growth. It
Right.
wasn't increasing, it wasn't decreasing, but there was a pretty significant decrease beginning in 2015. It's more levelized. This year, our sales are about what we projected they were going to be. So we're doing okay. I think it's more stable this year than perhaps it's been over the last 5 years or so. Other questions? If not, I'll turn it over to John and let him do his thing.
Well, it was a pretty good introduction, I think, for what I'm about to tell you anyway, with regard to your water rates. And actually, kind of in response to Bob's question, I was a part of that last rate study, so, and I think we all felt that we were being conservative when we assumed zero growth in sales, and unfortunately, by the time we presented it, just after that, your sales started to drop. But as you'll see in one of these slides, actually, the trend is not just here, but really, we've seen just about every water rate study we've done lately in the residential class in particular. It's just been this continual decline. So hopefully, if I can figure out which one of these buttons I hit. As Kevin said, he asked us to take another look at the revenue requirement, at least the revenue requirement analysis portion of the last rate study, kind of updated with actual data up to 2017, and then build in to the projections, these additional capital expenditures that you're anticipating, going forward. So basically, the update only looks at revenue requirements. Last time we did look at cost of service, but that's not a part of the scope for what we're here for tonight. The revenue requirement basically breaks into these 4 steps. First, we're going to project water sales, and as you'll see, we're taking a little different approach on that this time around. Project revenues at current rates, and as Kevin mentioned, you still have a couple of rate increases that are already pre-approved, and we built those into the model. Project revenue requirements, or what it costs to operate, maintain the water system here in Bryan. And then the last step is to determine the overall revenue adjustment that would be needed so that you could meet those projected revenue requirements. I go down. With regard to projected water sales, we separate your sales by customer class. You traditionally have had, if you look way back, residential, commercial, and industrial rates. Over the years, you combine the commercial and industrial into one class. We still keep that data though separated because we receive it that way from the billing office. We try to normalize the historical data because, as Kevin's graph showed you earlier, there are ups and downs due to wet years and dry years. And then project sales growth rates. I stuck this slide in just to kind of give you an idea of what that trend has looked like on the residential water usage. So this is what the average residential water usage is here in Bryan on a 100 cubic foot per month basis. So on the left side, you see the scale goes up to 6. So each of those numbers represents 100 cubic feet. You can see back in 2012, the average residential user used about 552 cubic feet of water per month. Today, or 2017, that had declined to 4.71. So, and if we went back 10 years, you just see this continual decline, going from backward to forward. So, for years, I think, believe me, we do a lot of water rate studies, and we see this. I think for years we kind of thought it was water meters running slow. I think everybody kind of gets fooled by that, thinking, well, water meters get old. As they get old, they run slower. And so it's just a matter of, eventually you replace the meters, you're going to recoup this. What we found out, now that we've got clients who have implemented new AMI systems, for example, where they put in brand new water meters, the water sales don't significantly change. What's caused this is people putting in more efficient water devices. Shower heads, toilets, washing machines, are all more efficient today than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Where this graph stops, I don't know, but you think at some point, we can only replace so many of those devices with more efficient devices. But because of this, what we built into the model this time is basically 2% negative growth or decline of 2% in residential sales. So in our model, for purposes of our model, we're assuming a 2% continued decline annually in residential sales. Zero decline, but zero growth on commercial and industrial. Hopefully we've seen the bottom of the drop in the commercial industrial side, but that's why really these analyses need to be updated periodically. You can't just kind of sit back. And I think too often especially when you do like a 5-year rate increase, it's just too easy to kind of think, oh, we're taken care of, but you really need to come back and look at this really on an annual basis. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have me do it, but just just yourself, just stay on top of it. So this is what we're projecting for water sales in 100 cubic feet. You can see that in 2022, we're showing just over 400,000 100 cubic feet. And as noted in the slide, the last water rate study had projected sales at almost 517,000. So that's a significant difference. Again, roughly 20% less than what was assumed in the last study. So the next step then is to project revenue at current rates. These rates reflect the current rates, the rates that took effect at the end of in December of 2017, the rates that are in place for 18. And you can see the average residential revenue per 100 cubic foot for residential is about $6.20. Commercial is about $5.30 and industrial $2.70. And as you probably know, you have declining block rates, so the more your water you use, you pay less per gallon or less per 100 cubic feet, which is why your larger industrial customers pay less. The cost of service study actually indicated that you should have that differential when we did that study back in 15. So not uncommon to see that type of cost differential. So to project revenues at current rates, we basically multiply those average revenues times the usage. And again, based on the rates that are in place in 2018, you can see we're projecting a total revenue of about $2,045,000. So, and we looked at the first 6 months. I think we're coming up pretty close, on track with that number. So then the next step in the process is to project revenue requirements, or as I say, what it costs to operate and maintain the system here in the water system here in Bryan. Now, there's two different approaches we can take. There's what's called a cash basis, and there's what we call a utility basis. The cash basis basically looks at what your cash requirements are. In other words, you've got to meet all your operating expenses, you've got to meet all of your capital expenses, and all of your debt expenses, both principal and interest. That's the approach that's typically used for municipal utilities. On the other hand, investor-owned utilities that are regulated typically use what's called a utility basis. And the main difference between those two is that rather than including actual capital expenditures, you include depreciation, as Kevin pointed out before. Also, one of the other differences is on a cash basis, you include the principal on debt, because you've obviously got to pay that. On a utility basis, though, you do not include principal retirement of debt, but you do include a return on investment. It's kind of an offset. So those two are the two basic different approaches that we can use. What we find is if we do a cash basis and it shows that that's a higher number than utility basis, well, if you set rates based on utility basis, you're eventually going to go broke. You're having negative cash flow and you're going to run out of money. If it's on the other hand, if you find the cash basis is lower and the utility basis could justify higher rates, well, then your customers kind of wonder why you're accumulating cash, because that's what's going to end up happening if you charge more than the cash basis. So for most municipalities, unless they're regulated, we typically are going to lean towards the cash basis, and that's what we've used here. We tried to normalize historical expense data, operating expense data. We did look at the 2008 budget with a little bit of adjustment from the city. We built in an inflation factor of 3% per year. I know there's a lot of debate about whether that's the right number, but right now that's probably as good as I think we can expect. Then capital outlay, and Kevin already touched on this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but part of now the Highway EPA actually requires you to develop an asset management plan that shows that you're going to build into your rates enough revenue that you can continue to make the necessary improvements in your system to avoid service delivery problems. So we built in as well some assumptions on the capital outlay based on that. Debt service, and you do have a new debt that's coming online for the solid line intervention. Now all of those expenses get added up and create what we call the gross revenue requirement. And from that we subtract out other income credits. So things like interest income that comes back into the water fund on interest earnings on your funds, and other miscellaneous charges, things like trip charges and whatnot. Those count as a credit against those revenue requirements. So, and I apologize for the size. I know it's a little small. Hopefully you've got one in front of you that's a little easier to see. But this is the breakdown of the projected revenue requirements from 2019 to 2022. You can see the gross revenue requirement for this year, kind of in the middle of the page there. It's about a little over $2,014,000. And then once we back out the credits, we had about $1,903,000. Now, the big thing I want to point out here, though, is capital outlay. What we've assumed is we set a target of $1 million. I know Kevin mentioned around $1.1 million. We set $1 million target for 2022, and we phase in over 4 years to get there. So if you look at that capital outlay line, we start out in 2019 at $250,000. That increases to $500,000 in 2020 to $750,000 in 2021, and then by 2022 you get to really that capital number that you need to be producing your revenue. So we're not trying to get there all in one jump, trying to spread it out over 4 years. So and you can see then the net revenue requirements at the bottom. Again, in 2019 about $1.9 million, grows to about $2.8 million by 2022. So So the last step in the process is to determine the overall revenue adjustment. It's real easy. We just compare those projected revenues, revenue requirements, I should say, to the revenues at current rates. And slide 13 should give you that breakdown. Actually, we're showing for 2019, again, based on that really somewhat reduced capital outlay compared to what you budgeted. If you see a negative here, that means your revenues are actually exceeding revenue requirements. But then going out, obviously in 2020, we're showing a shortfall of about almost 4%, 2021 about 19%, and by 2022 about a 35% shortfall in revenues versus revenue requirements. So the conclusions are basically that primarily due to the 20% reduction in sales since 2014 and the projected increase in capital outlay, revenues at current rates are not sufficient to meet the projected near-term revenue requirements. Projected revenues would need to be increased by approximately 35% in order to meet the projected 2022 revenue requirements. So our recommendation would be to phase in a rate increase over and above those current rates that you've already adopted of 7% a year for the next 4 years. That would amount to about $2.50 per month per residential customer per year. So each year they would see about a $2.50 a month increase in their water bill over each year for the next 4 years. And then obviously the last recommendation is to review these revenues and expenses periodically and adjust if needed. And again, even with a 4-year, if you were to adopt a 4-year increase, I wouldn't wait 4 years and take a look at it. You really need to take a look at that on an annual basis and make sure that expenses and revenues and sales are tracking with what you expected. So, I think I'm to the question mark. So. Yeah.
We have excellent economic activity going on now, but yet in your forecast on the industrial side, you show 0% growth. You did the same thing in the prior forecast, and we actually saw a increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see that right now at this point in time, that's plateau, and therefore you're not going to see anything growth from this point forward?
I'll tell you, I've got about 8 crystal balls in my desk drawer, and they all tell me different things. So,
right, I understand.
We did take a look at the first 6 months so far this year. And so far the first 6 months of this year seem to be tracking pretty close with what we've built into our model. We still saw that residential drop at
Right.
roughly 2%. But so far the industrial and commercial seem to be tracking pretty much where they were last year, pretty much level. Well, where we've got them in our model, I should say, because we tried to normalize those numbers a little bit to begin with.
Sure.
So.
And that's a challenge. I mean, what I've seen from my perspective, I worked at the gas company, probably in the last 20 years, we averaged about a 1% energy efficiency.
Decline.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so, what a customer used in 1998 versus today, we're probably looking at a 20% decrease. What we're starting to see now, kind of what you had mentioned earlier, is that we're starting to see a plateau. Everybody's turned over those furnaces, energy efficiency of windows, insulation, and things like that.
Right.
So we're starting to see the process of just a plateau. The only thing different is the fact that it has to come from economic development that's going to create any type of growth, and that's what we're seeing in our models as well. But so I think I agree with what you're saying, that if no economic growth is going to happen for the next 3 to 4 years, then obviously there'll be a 0% increase.
Yeah, and again, as I pointed out, the key is really not to wait 4 or 5 years to look at it. It's really look at it on an annual basis and kind of see where you're at.
Right.
If you know, for example, that you all of a sudden picked up a large water user, you can build that into the model and adjust these. And by the way, the models are all done in Excel spreadsheets, so and they're available to the city to update themselves. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to come back to have us do that. Although we certainly.
And did your forecast include talking to individuals, industry here in our local area to see what their protections?
We did not. I don't know if Kevin's done that or not, but we did not visit the industries in the area to see what their usage is.
So there's no communication with our local industry to see if there was any plans for any growth in the future?
No, we did not as a part of what we did. We did not.
So you do like a benchmark across the industry? Okay.
Yeah, and I think the options, or at least one of the options would be, if we look at doing a rate change, it could be a 1-year thing. can review it again in a year, and if you see that growth and you don't need that same projected revenue increase
You can
due
make
to increased sales, yes.
That's a good idea.
That's right. Or it just gets you to that capital number you're looking for sooner.
So let's hope for growth. Yeah.
That's why we keep looking so hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was sitting here, Bob kind of took my question, but yeah, that's what I was wondering about. I mean, I guess being an optimist, you always hope that we get some kind of industrial, commercial growth in here that would be, big water user and would have a big influence on our water sales, and if that would, what kind of a-
Even getting enough growth to offset inflation would be a big
Yeah.
help. You know, it really would.
Yeah, I think we're in the plateau market today. Yeah, I see.
It seems like we're kind of slow coming out of the recession. I think there's a lot of places you wouldn't have to drive too far to find a place that's probably closer to improving their revenues than we are. I mean, with growth and industry, maybe we'll catch up hopefully.
I think part of the blessing for us is that where we sit in the water utility is that we are in compliance with EPA regulations and we have surplus capacity at our plant. So we're not having to take a look at multi-million-dollar expansions or improvements to that would certainly alter the landscape of the rates
Sure.
that he's discussing. And the thing that I thought was helpful before, John, you did a rate comparison when the board adopted those 2015 rates. And at that time, when you took a look at area rates, our rates, even with the 5 years of adjustments, were still competitive with our neighbors' rates in 2015.
Yeah.
And some of those have increased since that time. So, we'll want to take a look at that as part of this as well to gauge where we're at compared to others in our area. But I think when we look at our current water rates, we're very competitive.
I think that the percentage sounds maybe big, but when you take the fact that you're starting out at a much lower number than some of the other surrounding communities, and like I say, 7% is only $2.50 a month increase for residential. In some communities that 7% could be, $4 or $5 a month increase for residential customers. You're starting from a higher number, so. Your rates, at least back when we did the last study, were very competitive, and we actually do the rates for some of those communities, Montpelier, Napoleon, and Clyde, and Napoleon's raised their rates since then. Montpelier just implemented some additional rate increases. And Clyde just hired us last week to do a water rate study. So I got a hunch that they're looking at needing to do something with theirs. So I think Defiance was the other one, the only one we didn't do any work with.
So part of our 5-year plan at 3%, that kicks in December.
That's correct, December 20th. Bills rendered on and after December 20th.
So we may have to
Of
look
this year and then next year. Those are
Modifying.
already planned. Well, we'll take a look at this, I guess, and see, kind of wanted to get your feel about it. Because if you don't support those sort of level of capital improvements, then it modifies what we might do here.
Yeah.
But I believe in the long run, you've got to get closer to that number if you're going to keep this sustainable, or you're going to get to the point where you have enough service work out there that you will be facing those double-digit, multiple-year adjustments that nobody likes to have happen. The revenue stream for the water utility is less than 10% of the electric. And our capital improvements are very expensive relative to the overall budget. So we absolutely have to be on top of this and planning these things to ensure that we keep those rates as low and stable while maintaining that reliable service in the long run.
And I agree with you, Kevin. I mean, it's like a house. You got to replace the roof. You got to replace,
Right.
the furnace, the outdoor tank. I mean, you have to continue on upgrade to keep it.
Right.
So, it makes sense.
Now, I think where you've got a lot of latitude is how quickly you want to get there. You know, you're going to be hearing in this next agenda item that we're planning to apply for an OPWC financing. We are going to be asking for $275,000 grant toward that project. It's estimated at about $600,000. So if we can get $275,000 for that project, we don't need to recover it in rates every year. Now, traditionally, we've not gone after a lot of that kind of financing opportunity. And there are, for water and wastewater utilities in Ohio, a lot of options that can either result in grants, 0% interest loans, principal forgiveness in some cases, depending upon what the project is. Part of our challenge was getting in the rotation of those. This will be our first one with the OPWC from the utilities that I'm aware of that we've ever done. But that's going to be our ask. Now, in the project schedule and the funding schedule of all of this, we probably won't be able to bid that project until 2020 or very late 2019. So that doesn't help us next year, but if we can get on the schedule a year and we keep putting those kinds of projects on a going forward basis, then we'll catch up with it. And hopefully that reduces our revenue requirement if we can get some money from those kinds of sources. We don't have to recover it from the customers. And everybody benefits here locally when we can do that. So I think, you know, we weren't asking you for any action tonight. You know, we can go take a look at some rates, I guess at maybe some different levels of revenue recovery. Bring those back for your consideration, show you what that may generate as far as cash and how quickly you can get there.
And I think you have to take a conservative approach to that. You know, like I said, I agree, zero growth, you know, what is our requirement? And if we
Right.
get growth,
Exactly.
that's a great benefit. for us.
Exactly.
So, but we don't want to be behind.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I agree with that.
Right, right. Nor do we have a need to over-recover either. We
Right,
want to try to
exactly.
keep.
We gotta balance it.
Right, exactly. Okay, any other questions for John? Thanks,
Okay.
John. I
John, thanks
appreciate
for
it.
coming. Great presentation. Okay, next on the agenda is a resolution. Pat, could you please number and read?
It's resolution number 24, 2018, approving submittal of an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission's OPWC State Capital Improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs and to execute contracts as required.
John? Nate? She needs some support. Okay.
As Kevin just alluded to, we are looking for opportunities to help the water fund make the lift of being able to meet the capital infrastructure goals. And Bryan, the city engineer, has graciously offered to help us fill out an application for the Ohio Public Works. And the resolution that's before you is asking for grant funding for a project that we will probably try and complete the beginning part of 2020. This project would single-handedly reach the 3,700 feet of water main per year. And we're anticipating that we will have to do a match or a combination of a match and financing. It probably will end up like a situation that we just got through with South Walnut, where we were able to match the project with cash from the water fund balance. But we are anticipating that it will be around $350,000. So I don't know, Nate's going to talk more about the technical aspect of the project, but I was up here to talk about money.
And that's huge. I mean, that's a lot. That would make a difference.
Yeah, speaking of capital projects, good evening. I just wanted to touch on one of our next projects that we'd like to propose here is the South William Street Water Main Replacement Project. The project consists of the installation of approximately 3620 feet of 8-inch water main, 5 fire hydrants, 18 gate valves, 63 water services, all within the public right-of-way of South William Street. Basically, it's from Butler to Perry Street, East Pierce Street from William Street to Cherry Street, and on East Butler Street from Cherry Street to Allen Street. It's kind of a lot there, but the majority of the project is South William Street. We have a little spur off of there, which is the 300 block of East Pierce, and then of course the Butler Street project up there too is just south of where the old Lincoln School was. All that is old 4-inch cast iron lead joint water services, real similar to what we did over there on Walnut Street. It's pretty troublesome water line. We've had some maintenance issues on it. Basically, I think we've had 18 documented since 1987 when we started keeping records of such, water main breaks in that area. And it's approximately 80 to 100 years old. I went through some of the housing records and stuff like that, and some old water line maps, and my best guess is most of that water main is 80 to 100 years old in that area. So, like I said, 63 water services. So if anybody has any questions about the project itself, that pretty much is right up there with our, 3/4 of a mile.
Curiosity,
Sure.
you talk about these water main replacement projects, 80, 100 years, is that the norm?
It is for the old cast iron stuff, like we haven't even, a lot of the AC, which was put in the 70s, we haven't really seen an end to that. It seems to be less troublesome. We don't have a lot of, I think it was improper bedding, the problems that we do have when they just bury cast iron in clay, you get ground shift, freezing, thawing. I think that contributes a lot to the main breaks. There is pitting and rust in certain areas, I'm sure with the gas, with your anodes and stuff like that, how you have troublesome areas in certain areas.
We shoot electric circuits through.
Yeah, so you have, some areas that are okay, and then some areas are troublesome, with soil conditions and stuff like that, so it's hard to say.
Right.
But a lot of the cast iron does last, right.
It's amazing that we're making decisions based from 100 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. But, the other thing is that these are lead joint. They're not in contact with the water, but usually when you have lead joint water lines, there's the potential of having lead service lines, and as you know, we're required to get those out of the system, or very soon will be. So we want to do our part, as we spoke of before, to try to get that stuff taken care of and be proactive, and before we're forced to, let's voluntarily get that stuff out of there. So, just to touch on that, the Walnut Street project, we assumed there was going to be a lot more of lead service lines, and to be honest with you, I think it was 2 out of the 75 water services that we found on the customer side were known lead service lines, and the rest weren't, which is odd to me. I didn't expect to see those. And the 20 out of the 75 on our side ended up being lead service lines that we are able to eliminate from our system. So that's a great thing. I'm glad that we were able to accomplish that, and hopefully we can continue that. This is another place that we may find similar situations. So it'd be nice to be able to get rid of that also.
Yeah, I would say the estimated service life that people would typically use is around 75 years. I don't know, Pat, if you recall what 50 is what's in the depreciation schedule, so I've seen it anywhere from 50 to 75. So
100.
Using 100 is being pretty liberal.
Yeah, extremely.
But it gives us at least a starting point.
But I think
But we've
the customers
exceeded
have
our
to be
max.
happy we get
When we had 35 breaks on Walnut Street, we'd exceeded that maximum service life.
Yeah, exactly. And you may recall also with these 4-inch lines, the insurance services office report that came in for the water utility and fire department last year noted how many fire hydrants we still had connected to 4-inch lines. I think there were 43, if I remember, something like that. And I believe between, between the Bryan Street project and South Walnut, we were taking out 13 of them, I think, this year.
Yeah, total, I think that between the two.
So we made a good dent.
Firefighting capacity is another big thing. To get rid of that, you don't want to fight a fire on a 100-year-old 4-inch water line, you know what I mean? You could,
plus it helps your insurance rates, I'm guessing, too.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Getting
Yeah, very
that rating
careful.
upgrade definitely does for the community.
Nate, we replaced 3,700 feet on Wall Street, or roughly about the same amount on the William Street project. Do you have any estimate what's left to replace of the cast iron that's in the ground?
Gosh, I can give you some numbers on that. I have tracked that in the past, and we do have pretty good numbers on how much cast iron, how much AC, how much PVC, how much, of that is still out there. And we try to keep track of 4-inch too, because we have a grading system, I guess, that we use. If it's 4-inch, that's a plus that it needs to go. How many breaks on that line is another, tool that we use to see how, when it should go. So we pretty much have graded all these lines and when they should go or should be replaced. And I can get you those numbers of how much cast iron's left. I mean, there's still some that's from the original town. As far as the cast iron goes around the square, there's still some of that water main that's actually still there. That's, from the original water line that they purchased and put in, the original cast iron there. So some of that's still there.
125 years.
Yeah. Still in service.
That'd be interesting to know. And
Yeah.
my other question is, what's the estimated service life of the PVC that we're using?
That's yet to be determined, I think. I mean, hopefully,
It's
they don't come back and say it's not good for you or this or that, but, we've had good luck with PVC as far as what we put in, since the later 80s, and they've probably gotten better with plastics and PVC and polyethylene and stuff like that has gotten better and, not exposed to air. So hopefully, and with proper bedding, like we bed it with pea stone, so it takes up a little shock. We've not had any issues, to be honest with you, with PVC, but I think the jury's still out, and we'll see. Hopefully, we can come back in 100 years and we can say, man, we better increase that to 150 years.
Yeah, nearly all of our water main replacements over the last 30 years have been PVC. So we've got about 30 years of experience with it. It's worked very well for us.
With very few problems. I don't even really can't even document. There's probably a few, but very few.
See, back in the day, they didn't know lead was bad for you. So.
Right, exactly. And AC too. I mean, AC is actually put in the 70s. We've had very little problems with it also. Right. So that's, try to get your 75 and 100 years out of it.
You still get good leak detection out of it?
Yeah, we run the leak detection and pretty much the last leak detection, I think everything's, I don't know if they fixed everything in the last leak detection that we ran.
Oh, yeah, those are taken care of, but is that your question, Karen?
As far as PVC and getting leak detection out of it, is it as good as with cast?
Some of it.
Well, I think what she's talking about is how far you can hear down the line. You cannot hear leaks as far down a PVC main as you can a cast iron, just because the sound waves don't travel that far. You do need a few more access points to listen,
But that's probably a good thing, isn't it? I mean, that it doesn't carry as far, makes the leaks easier to isolate.
well, if you have access points, if you don't
That's
have
right.
an access point, then it's going to be hurting pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we've ever got a PVC that was leaking that was not the result of improper construction.
Right.
A pebble or stone getting into the gasket,
Yeah.
or somebody getting into it with a backhoe or tractor board. For it to just fail, I've never really seen it.
In AC, the biggest problem is the galvanized service saddles that failed. Remember, galvanized was the best thing too, and now we're pretty much have to replace anything galvanized, like whole subdivisions that use galvanized saddles is our next concern to pick off one at a time as we find them. But most of those are kind of eaten away too, so.
Now, if we are awarded this grant, we won't get the money until after July 1st of next year. So, as we've discussed, the summertime is not an optimum time to be bidding projects and expecting to get a lot of good qualified contractors. So, we've discussed this with Bryan and said, we should be ready to bid that in December of 2019 or January of 2020. So just to kind of get your mind around that schedule, we've got to apply for it this fall. We'll know, I think, whether we got awarded the money about the end of this year, but the money won't free up until the next fiscal year of the state government, which is July 1st. So.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Don.
Jim?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I should have mentioned also, council adopted the enabling legislation for this a couple of weeks ago.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Pay the bills. I'll make a motion.
Second.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Bob and Tom.
Next is comments from BPA and staff. Mr. Iyer.
Dick, I applaud you, welcome your comments, and support you.
Thank you. Jim.
I feel the need to respond to some of the things that I've read. I'm not going to get long-winded on this, but some of the remarks that have been made in connection with Bryan City Council and the Board of Public Affairs proceeding with this, opposing the aquifer, that we're proceeding without having the facts. And I don't think that's the case. I think, personally, I think that we're doing a great job of dealing with this, with the information we have. New things are always coming in. I guess it's been mentioned that we're fueling the mob and causing problems for some people's families. I guess everybody does what they think they have to do. I don't condone anything like that. I don't think it accomplishes a darn thing. But I think that as the information comes in, it's going to have to be looked at logically. And I think, personally, I think that's what this is going to boil down to, is more logic than information. Because the information a lot of times comes in and it'll be presented as one person's opinion. It may be an educated person, but still it's one person's opinion. One person will say, this is the way it is. Somebody else will say, no, this is the way it is. So you have to draw your own conclusions, and I think that's where the logic comes in. I don't feel that any of the natural resources we have are going to last forever. I mean, if you look at the petroleum and fossil fuels, I think that's proof that nothing's going to last forever. And even though they find substitutes for a lot of natural resources, I don't think they're going to find a substitute for our water.
No.
And just the fact, Sunday coming home from vacation, driving through the outskirts of Perrysburg and looking around, and there's a lot of things going on in Perrysburg. A lot more than we see going on around here. And it struck me, the thought struck me that it may be 14 million a day now, whatever it is, but that's not going to cover it for long. It's going to have to be more. And I haven't heard a peep out of anybody from any of the other communities. I guess maybe that's what troubles me a little bit, is the people that are, I guess, are doing the demonstrating, or the people they're referring to as the mobs. I haven't heard any remarks made from any of the other communities in response to the repercussions that might be for the communities back here that we rely on that. To them, it's a money thing. It's going to save them money on their water bills. Or at least that's the way I see it. I mean, we're not saving the world with this, or I should say, they're not saving the world with this. It's a convenience and a money saver for them, and a money maker for some people. So I think, like I say, I'm very happy with the way that this is being handled by the council and the board. And there again, I think if we continue to look at this logically, I think it'll work out. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Jim. Karen?
Nothing.
Wanted to thank, well, John left, but thank him for the presentation, and Kevin his presentation, and I think in the next 3 months we're really going to take a hard look at information we have in front of us and have to determine what we have to do with rates, and we just have to stay ahead of the curve. So it was nice that he was here today and got us thinking about it, and
Sure.
we've got a couple months to react on it now. So that's it.
Yeah, and I agree. I thank John and Kevin for the presentation. And, that's about all I have to say. Kevin?
I don't have anything additional for your consideration this evening.
I'd just like to say, that I should have said it last night at council too, kind of a public service announcement. Everybody has these signs out against aquifer. It's fine to express your opinion. We do have a sign ordinance in Bryan. Those signs are to be back behind the sidewalk or out of the right of way. So if you would just be respectful of our sign ordinance as well in expressing your opinion, appreciate it.
Ms. Buda? Department council. Jackie?
Good evening. We received notice from the facilitator for the strategic planning process that he has a family emergency and cannot make it this Thursday on the 23rd. So we need to reschedule. We looked at his schedule. He is available to come back on September the 6th if the board is open and available that day.
So we need a motion to cancel?
So we need a motion to reschedule to September the 6th, if that is acceptable.
I move to
What
cancel.
time would you like to say?
8 a.m. still.
I move to cancel the special the meeting for strategic planning that was going to be this Thursday and reschedule for Thursday, September 6th at 8 a.m.
I'll second that.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Out of the downtown assessment resource process that we went through a couple years ago, or a couple months ago, weeks ago, sorry. There was a downtown cleanup committee that has been newly formed, and BMU was contacted by a volunteer of the group, asked if we would allow use of hydrants to spray off the downtown streets. And they've also contacted the fire department and asked for volunteers to man the hoses. And also the use of a tractor with a broom to sweep. So I am up here to seek BPA approval. It's going to be a day in September, start about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and go until complete. And with what I know of the process so far, I know that they're still working out the details, but just to scrub the streets, pull weeds. And I think the goal is to do this before the downtown festival
Right.
that the chamber's
I
putting
think
on.
it's the 15th of September is the date that they
Yeah, that they
have,
proposed.
proposed, which is a Saturday, as I recall.
Right.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I'll make a
Accepting
motion.
volunteers.
Yes.
Is this going to be kind of like another day of giving?
I'm sorry.
It's just like another day of giving. We're going to give back.
I give every day.
Sure, if you'd like to
Anybody,
participate.
they will be glad to have all the volunteers they can get. So, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Bob?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Think about it.
Yeah, I just had a question for HR. Are we still on for Thursday for the invite at the senior center?
Yes, the
Okay.
senior center luncheon is still this Thursday at 11:30.
Okay. Thank you. Max, I forgot to, oh, Joe, go ahead.
I wanted to give the board an update on the internet bandwidth upgrade. We have successfully launched the new F5 bandwidth manager it's a large project in itself. We have everything ready for the first phase of the internet upgrade, pending the delivery of our new circuit to us. The latest news I have from our carrier is that around the end of August, they should have a circuit ready to turn up for us. And then we would test it for about a week and then get ready to activate that first CMTS router in the head-end. I have contacted them and told them that I have scheduled the engineering folks to come in and help us on the first one towards the end of September, because of their schedule is very tight and I have to get a spot when I can. We hope that once we get the first unit done, then we'll just go from one to the other and get this upgrade started for our customers. It's been way too long coming, but we've been waiting on several other folks. So. But I just want to give you folks an update on that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Did we have a little hiccup in the fiber cut?
Yes, there was a fiber cut a few states away, and what happens when that occurs, the internet does not go out, but it slows way down because...
Okay, thanks, Joe. Max, I didn't want to forget to ask.
Thanks.
Thank you. With that,
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
Jim?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.